the Cyberpunk fans in the room wanting to hear us talk about how you do Cyberpunk in different media. My opening question was actually going to be to Mike, and it might yet be to Mike if I can buy enough time for him, about how, like, when there was nothing in this field, how you brought it into the tabletop space. But for you guys, how did you start saying, okay, we have this dystopian world, we want to represent it in a way both mechanically and like visually in a miniatures platform. How do you guys start approaching that?
Do you want the artsy side or do you want the truth?
So, we probably have time for both. Let's go with the truth.
So let's go with the truth, because this is way more interesting. So I have. Let me tell you a little bit. So I'm John Kovaleski. I am the CEO, founder of Monster Fight Club. Company got started about 7 years ago. Before that, you might have heard of a company called Gale Force 9. Gale Force 9, we made probably one of the first companies to make what I consider good thematic board games. And I founded that company in my basement back in 1998. And we started with some of the first laser engravers making tokens, markers, sort of stuff. And I was a big Warhammer nerd back then, and my college roommate was really into it. And so I went to school at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, and that will come back in a little while to talk about why there's giant merchant ships in my booth right now. But when I was shipping, I was always tabletop gaming, and I had like toy soldiers on the ship, and I'd be painting and stuff. At the academy, it was not cool back then to be a gamer. It was not cool to be a nerd. I was the captain of the scuba club, and that was cool because it had a door that we could lock, and that was important. And that's where me and my buddies used to play D&D and other stuff in the back, and we would nerd out and do our things. So you fast forward a little bit to my buddy Matt York, and he was, at the time, he was like the Michael Jordan of the Warhammer world. So if there was a Warhammer tournament out there, he was playing his Skaven and he was winning it. And when I got the laser engraver, which at the time, now you can get them for like, what, $2,000 or something, or even cheaper. But they were like $30,000, $40,000 back then. They were expensive. And the Gulf War was going on, and I was young and in a war zone and making way too much money, and got lucky and got myself a laser engraver. And we started etching cool stuff for ourselves, and then my buddy Matt wanted me to make some shields for his Skaven army, and we started making movement trays. And if there's any old-time Warhammer 40K players in here, I don't know if you ever remember like the Arcs of Visibility or the multi-template. That was something that we came up with because when Warhammer first came out, you didn't even have templates. They were kind of in the back of the book that Xerox it out, print it. And so I was one of the first guys out there to use a laser to cross over to the gaming market. So we started making this sort of stuff. And all this is a little bit relevant. Oh, there he is, Mr. Pondsmith. See, I'm sitting here telling ancient history, killing time until you showed up. Killing time.
So far, we've learned the price of a laser engraver in the 90s.
Yes. Oh, wow. And so we're
exciting.
Yeah, probably good.
Come, sit, hang out.
Okay.
All right, now the gang's all here.
Oh, here we are again.
Yes.
Actually, without Irene waiting for me like a snake in the grass or a Jedi at the far end of the pit.
I mean, I do like the snake in the grass camo that she's got on.
I think, I would not have seen her, but she snuck right up on me.
I hire most of my employees for stealth stat, so.
Oh, okay, I had no idea. That explains it. So I also can never find you.
I mean, I'm a shadow in the shade.
Yeah, I'll say.
So he was asking me this really artsy question on how.
Him or me?
He was asking me.
Okay, no.
Because
I
you-
mean,
I should have been asking you.
I don't
You
do,
weren't
no,
here.
I don't do artsy questions.
Well, exactly, because
I'm a guy with a
he's
big
like,
stick.
so how do I approach making miniatures and all of that for the dystopian cyberpunk universe? And I said, do you want the artsy side or do you want the reality? And so I started giving the background about where Monster Fight Club came from, and I was working my way up, and then of course you interrupted when we came in.
What can I say?
But now that you're here,
My interrupting kept him awake.
exactly.
Okay, so tell me what your question is, because you're the guy that makes the figures.
Well, the figures came in because he was like, so how did you approach it? How did you come about making figures? And when I said, do you want the reality or do you want the artsy side? And the reality was, I said, Mike, I want to make your miniatures.
Yeah, that's kind of the reality, except that we do kind of aim you, if you remember.
Yes.
Because otherwise, I'd like to say a few things here. Some of John's most bloody, brilliant ideas come at like 2 in the morning, Washington time, because the man does not sleep, and he'll call me up and go, hey, Mike, take a look at this. And he'll throw something up on the screen, and I'm looking at it going, it's 2 in the fucking morning, John. You're really trying our friendship here. But invariably, it's something really cool because this man is very enthusiastic and he's also clever. Maybe sometimes
I try.
too clever.
I try.
So, I don't know if I'm the person to answer this, but I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
Okay, we look at a couple things. First of all, we look at you, and I actually go around to people's games, like I've done this week, or this convention, and I see what they're doing in the games. So if I see that, people have a whole lot of soldiers, I kind of know what they're using. If I see people are marking certain things with, some type of counter, I'll ask, like, well, what's that supposed to be? Oh, that's where I have the ninjas. And I'll go, okay, ninjas. And if I get 5 or 6 people who have ninjas, then I go back to John and I go, they're doing ninjas. And
We need ninjas.
yeah, everybody likes ninjas. Ninjas are like popcorn, okay? So that's part. We look at what you guys do because there's no sense in doing something that, you're not gonna wanna buy. 2, for me, I look at what nobody else is doing. For example, we have all kinds of vehicles and things running around. There's nothing like Monsters AB4. And he took what was essentially a really nice but vague piece of art of what the AB looked like, and he translated it into a bloody gorgeous vehicle. And by the way, you gave one to my daughter, Dolan, and before I had a chance to get out of my mouth that you had done that, she said, oh wow, I have to get one of these. And
Joy.
I said, he gave you one. And she said, yes, and made a little squealing noise because she likes to paint. So you have made my daughter very happy. But the point is, if you're gonna do something like that, unless you're getting people who do Gundam kits, you should look at how they'll use it and how easy is it to put it on the road. So, for example, his AB4 kit is beautiful and complex in some levels, but it's ridiculously easy to put together. I'm not looking at going, okay, slot into A, slot into B.
Yeah.
So that's the second thing is I look at, how people use it and kind of what's not being served in the market. And then there's a thing that I used to teach many years ago, he knows this. Do you want to step in the rule of cool?
No, I'm gonna let you do this one because no one does the rule of cool like you, sir.
Okay, well, thank you, but you're cooler. Okay, James and I actually used to teach at the same school, and he got the upper division, I got the lower division, guys. He said, how do you make a video game, Professor Pondsmith? You pray. Seriously, there's what I call the rule of cool. So whenever I was telling people about building weapons, I said, well, at core, weapons usually are all kind of a bunch of numbers. And there's only a certain amount of spread in those numbers before the weapon becomes what's called the classic BFG, or big fucking gun. And those of you who remember way back at Doom and other things, the big fucking gun was the one that you got that did everything, and no one could kill you because you had it. But the thing was that the big fucking gun unbalances your game. So what do? Well, I multiply things by the rule of cool, which is if it's got spikes and it's long and it has multiple grips, it's cooler than if it's just a tube with something in the back. So you actually multiply what its value is, i.e. the damage it does, the range it has, if you're really pushing your luck, how easily destroyed it is, the difficulty to get power or reloads. You can add those all together and get a number. And I have many spreadsheets at TAL that do that. But the rule of cool says, okay, even if it is not that big and I don't have huge numbers, I know enough about my audience to know that if it's really big and nasty, they're going to actually kind of go past what it can really do, because they imagine their character walking into the bar and going, you know that. So the rule of cool works very well because it helps level out the numbers. And in the end result, for those of you who are designers, we move numbers around. And the numbers make the world, So basically, I take those 3 points for me, and a lot of times, I will call up John, or he and I will be working on something for a class, and I'll go, what do you think?
I mean, usually it's, 2 a.m. at a Chinese restaurant in the International District.
Yes.
But
Why am I always up at 2 a.m.? I'm an old guy.
look at your friends, buddy.
Yeah. My friends are all crazy, man.
Night Crew Games for a
Night
reason.
Crew, yes. Yeah, I noticed that. They all have bleary eyes. They kind
I
of.
do what I can.
Why did you call them Zombie Crew?
God, they'd appreciate that. No, you
Yeah.
gotta have some subtlety here, Mike.
So tell more about the rule of cool, because you and I have talked about this a lot.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing, whether it be video games. I spent a lot of my career in video games before moving to tabletop. And I mean, it is this thing of, okay, what drives us to want a thing, right? And sometimes it's functionality, but a lot of humanity is about expression, right? We're all wearing different clothes to express who we are, right? Every day we make a choice about how we want the world to see us, and that's very important for players, especially when they're expressing somebody they could never be in real life. And Cyberpunk, one, is a universe of style, right? And two, it's a universe where you can be literally anybody. You want to change how you look? Well, we can just go into a shop and do that overnight, right? Mm-hmm. And so more than anywhere else, I think they've got this really important moment where sometimes cool is the most important thing when creating some of the cyberpunk stuff.
Yeah, the rule of cool is really important. John, you got anything to throw in this?
I think for me, it's a lot of it's, also pop culture. It's like we've been watching movies since we were this big. And you sit there and it's like, oh, well, you watch Predator and he's standing there, Jesse Ventura mowing down everything else. Or you see somebody jump off of something with a giant sword and split somebody in half, and you're like, I'd love to do that.
And so
How can I do that?
And
Here's
so
your opportunity.
You start asking yourself, okay, what weapons do I have to put together to do that?
Exactly.
And, that structures a lot of, what a weapon will do, but it also will tell you something about what the armor is going to look like.
Yep.
Is it equally cool? If I'm going after Darth Vader, I'd better, Darth better look good, because if he's wearing a business suit, I don't want to even fight him. So when you look at the things you're going to make in figures and so forth, you're essentially translating the rule of cool without the numbers. When he does a figure, we're looking at what it looks like and the name and how it feels, but we're not seeing the numbers for the most part until my company puts together the DLC. So what it means is you have to reach in and grab people by the hindbrain and have them go, woo, shiny.
Well, it's interesting. Part of what I want to get to later is the different ways we all have to express this world, right? Because you're right, like when you're doing a book, you've got a very different set of tools to do this than you guys do. But I actually really wanted to start off by asking you about, like, you know, when you were doing this was like one of the first Cyberpunk games out there. The genre was pretty young when...
I think there were like 4 books, and I think one of them I knew, which was Walter John Williams' Hardwired.
Yep.
And when I read Hardwired, I said, this is really great. I know what it looks like. I got the feel of it. The main character's named Cowboy, and he drives a cyber-driven tank. And I could imagine the tank, and I kind of knew Cowboy because of the name. Had to be kind of long and rangy, but tough, you know.
Well, so when you were looking at all this stuff and decided, okay, D&D exists, but like there's not even a ton of RPGs out there, and then you go, okay, I'm going to translate this into a game space. How do you build the systems and mechanics that represent Cyberpunk? How do you take that from words on a page in a story to a story everyone can tell through this game?
You asking me or him?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean...
I think he does all the cool stuff, and, you know, I just kind of write numbers. But,
You did it first, so...
okay, I'm to blame.
You,
My fault.
you are literally at fault for me being here and me asking you this question.
I brought this on myself.
What have you done?
What madness. Okay. In the case of Cyberpunk, it is very much what I do every day, which is I go around and I'm looking for the zeitgeist, you know, the spirit, as it were. And it's not about like Cyberpunk. It's about, we're in a time that's incredibly stressful and people want to be heroes because they can't handle a day-to-day. You know, you go in a supermarket and suddenly your steak is $19 a pound. You want to do something about it, and blowing up the supermarket is probably not going to be that useful. Well, actually, yeah, it depends. So you go into something like Cyberpunk going, the world isn't fair, and I really wish I had the power to do it. But you don't want to do a superhero game. We've done superhero games, and they work on a different set of capabilities, not in terms of like, you know, I can't throw fireballs or something like that, but rather, you know, you have secret identities, you've got costumes, you have ways you move and travel. Somebody who's in a cyberpunk world wants to have all that stuff put away until they really need it. And then they can basically click a mental switch and have it at that point. So when I looked at Cyberpunk, that was what I was looking at was, okay, how can people be heroes in their own space? I looked at one of the beautiful things in Hardwired, which was almost every character there had something hidden that made them more powerful. And it was always technological. So, you know, for example, Sarah, one of the main characters in there in Hardwired, has a thing called the Cyber Snake, which is think of it like a metal garden hose that you can shoot out of the back of your throat. And if you're kissing somebody, well, this is the ultimate in bad French kissing. You know, it has blender blades on the end of it, right? But what I looked at was that's a hidden thing. It's technological. It doesn't take away from the fact that Sarah is beautiful and interesting. It just means that, you know, she can be a capable assassin. Okay. So when I looked at Cyberpunk, that's what I was looking at was, you know, how do you become heroes without having to, you know, be exposed to radiation or spiders or something like that. And another thing about it is that in a superheroic genre, the agency that changes you for the most part is external to you. You know, you get bit by the radioactive spider, you know, you get exposed to Kryptonite's 5 or whatever. That's cute, but you once again are not the controller of your agency. If I walk into Metalheads, which is, you know, a really cool place where I can get cyberware installed, I may have saved that money. I know what I want. I'm not going to go get superpower eyes because I, wasn't paying attention and, I walked into radioactivity. I know what I want. I know what I want to do with it. So the second thing about Cyberpunk for me was agency. You had the ability to change your situation in the world, and you could do that by your own conscious choice. And that had an interesting thing that went with it, which is if you're going to be buying cyberware, you have to have a world that has it. You've got to have people who sell it. You've got to have people who test it badly. You have to have things to support that agency. And all of those things make a really good cyberpunk world. And it's not about, everything being trashed. It's not about road warriors riding down the road. It is about using technology to give yourself power and agency. And I looked at it and said, I need a world where people need that power. They have the ability to get that agency and they can use it. So I'll give you a case in point. By the way, you guys can throw something at me if I go on for too long. He knows I'll go on for all.
I'll cut you off. Don't worry.
Yeah, at the knees.
I mean, or maybe at the neck, one of those two.
Yeah, it's a vampire in you. Any rate, but think about David in Edge Runners. David is, this kid who's getting crud beat out of him at his, preppy high school. And one reason he's getting crud beat out of him is there's a kid who is rich enough to buy cyberware. He can now have super reflexes. David gets the Sandevistan. Actually, I've now heard Sandevistan, Sandevistan. We wrote it as Sandevistan. I have to get Walter's take on it. But the upshot is that while it falls into his lap, he makes the choice to install it. And thus, he takes agency of it, and he gains a superpower. Now, eventually it might kill him, and it certainly messes him up. But he follows that paradigm of decision, agency, and need. So when you're doing cyberpunk, you want to get that down. And you also want to have, need defined, because otherwise you're just a guy who's got a lot of metal or whatever, who has no reason why he has all that metal. Why do I have this? What am I going to use it for? Well, I can, rob banks. Yeah, right, big deal. But to defend your family, or to stop the bullies at your school from thumping on you, or any number of things. You're out in the jungle somewhere, and the military has said, there's 800 guys over the hill and I want all you 5 guys to take them down. That's the need. So I built Cyberpunk very consciously like that. And that was how I thought of it was, what do people need? And I built a world where they were going to need it a lot more. It was a world that if I wanted to, get steak that wasn't $18 a pound, I was going to have to do something. Now I could steal the steak, I could grow the steak, I could do a lot of things. Doesn't hurt if I have, chemistry lab built into my body and I can say, oh, this steak is sucky. So, sir.
Oh, I just want to sort of follow up because when you're taking one of those moments, right, like, you're in a fist, very simple, like you're in a fist fight, you want to hit somebody with your cyber arm, right, and you're looking at a blank piece of paper and you go, I need to make rolling a handful of dice feel like hitting someone with a cyber arm. How do you do that?
Asking me?
I mean, you're the one. I do it with cards, so I'm certainly not asking me.
That's
That man
true.
does it with plastics, so.
Well, yeah, but
I make it look cool physically.
Yeah,
there we go.
But
Yes.
the rules are still.
Well, the thing is that what John does a lot of times, John will do something, and I'll look at it and go, what does this mean? This is a cool thing. Why is it cool? How does it work? And I'll go back and call him up and go like, okay, so what's holding this in the air?
Yeah.
And
Or like the Cybertruck we just did. So
Yeah.
how do you have multiple containers connected? Why is there a six-wheeled system in between? That almost looks autonomous. Can that be its own thing? Can it drive separately? Can it break off? Can you put something else on top of it? Can it have a robot arm on top of it? If you did that, how are you going to blow up that ship over there? wholly separate thing that comes out. Oh, well, I'm going to make a missile. So how are you going to move the missile? I don't know. Let's put something on top of this little thing in the center. And next thing I know, I have missiles on top of little cars that can drive themselves around. And that's, the need was I needed to move the missile. I had to shoot the missile. So it just kind of popped up. One of the things that I loved about Cyberpunk early on is a lot of times, even when you didn't have people to play with, the source books were always amazing to me because it was like a Sears Christmas catalog.
Yeah.
You would sit there and you would flip through the pages and you would see this. It's like I don't know why I need this, but I need it because someday it might pop up. And
Yeah.
it just keeps rattling around in your head, and someday that opportunity presents itself. God, I wish I had a monogatana,
yeah.
or I wish I had, something.
But John's right, because, that is why, for example, our Chromebooks are designed the way they are. Back, in the, I guess, roughly the 2000s.
The olden days.
The old, I remember when we didn't have all these newfangled phones. But we had a thing called Sharper Image. And and there were stores of Sharper Image. And the whole point of it was you would walk into a Sharper Image store, or you would look at the catalog, which is invariably in your seat pocket of your airplane.
In a 6-hour flight.
Yeah, and you're like, what do I have bought a lot of shit out of there at that time. I bought my son's baby carriage out of Sharper Image. It was scary.
The first drones were in there.
Yeah.
The little.
Oh, yeah. I didn't buy them, I waited. But the whole point of it, okay, you see it and you go, I want it, and you find the reason, and then you use agency to get it. And, like in the case of some of the things John invents, what I find myself doing is thinking, okay, so I think this is really cool. What am I going to use it for? Can I really do something with this? And I write an adventure that uses that. In fact, I'm not going to borrow your truck yet, but I'm borrowing some of the ideas behind it for the AP that I'm going to be doing tomorrow. Because, I'm asking, okay, do people use this to transport? Who uses it to transport? Will I need to transport something? Why has the truck got all these multiple levels to it? And I go up going, okay, so that sounds pretty good. Maybe the truck has to be picking up parts along the way until I have a caravan, So for me, that's one reason I developed a lot of the things that happen in Cyberpunk. The other thing for all of you badass dudes out there is you are going to have to do the homework. If it works and is believable, then you're halfway there. Somebody will not go, oh, that's really stupid, man. There's always a guy on the internet, in Reddit or wherever, he says, no, man, I know all of it. But the point is, if I can come back and say, no, and HK 5K, MP 5K can do this, and he goes, well, no, it can't. I go, have you ever fired one? I have. It's my favorite gun. And, it kind of settles that, but I didn't get that without doing the homework. We would go down to Las Vegas back when the Gamma Show was there, and we would go out, the TAL staff, and we would just shoot automatic weapons like nobody's business.
Sure.
And we'd be like taking notes, like, okay, this pulls to the left and it does this. It got so kind of ingrained in what we did that our rather peacenik art director came to me one day and said, I really want to learn how to shoot these things. And she feared and hated guns, but it looked like something she'd like to know. Agency. I don't want to be around when I break into her house. So, I see, Winter going, yes, die!
One of
You
the
killed the mailman and everybody else for the next 5 blocks.
Well, I know in the early days, it was a lot of military guys that were playing 2020.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason they played it, because they said it just feels right.
Yeah,
When you pulled the trigger and you shot somebody in game, it felt.
Yeah, well,
Right.
Yeah, doing the homework.
Yeah.
We got a lot of cops and Leo's on it, law enforcement officers. We got a lot of military, and it's really weird when you've got a guy sitting in a trench in Iraq, and he's going, yeah, we're all playing Cyberpunk out here, and I'm going, no one's shooting at you enough already, right? But they would go, but you got this right. So like wound damage, instead of you lose 50 hit points, one reason the original damage system was done the way it was I went out and I found a friend of mine who was an Army a Ranger paramedic who had been there. He had to plug the big holes in people and get them, stabilized and get them off the battlefield. And I would go, Rob, how do we do this? How long will somebody survive they have a hole this big? So that gave us baselines that were believable. So yeah, you have to do the homework. And Cyberpunk is a real interesting exercise in real world and homework combined with what's cool and what balances out and what's the need, And a lot of times you look at the Sharper Image catalog or Temu, or Alibaba, and how many of us have found ourselves looking at Alibaba and going, yeah, I don't really know what I need for a flying iron board, but I gotta have it, man. You will find the need.
So it's
I have
interesting.
crap all over the house that, I'm just going, why did I buy that? My wife says, because you're stupid.
So we talk a lot about top-down versus bottom-up design. Top-down is where you're starting with the concept, the idea, the name, finding mechanics for it, right? And that's sort of a lot of what you're talking about is, okay, I know I want to have this cool piece of cyberware. How do I make the cyber snake out of the systems I have? Versus the other way around where you're like, okay, I've got this cool system. What does it represent? What is the metaphor behind the system? What's it gonna make people feel, right? And for us, we ask that a lot because obviously we've got a card-based system. There's a limited amount you can do with it. But for example, we were trying to figure out, okay, what should be the main resolution mechanic in a cyberpunk world with cards? And I started out with a really grognardy, magic-y system. I was like, that's not cyberpunk. So I ripped the whole thing out, and then I thought about, okay, what does cyberpunk feel like? Well, it feels like betting on yourself. You've got one chip, your own life, and you're pushing it in again and again and again until you finally are inevitably gonna lose. And so I was like, okay, so it's a poker game, right? And finding things that express the feeling of these things is a big part of how we develop the mechanics for these various games. Yeah.
And another thing that goes with it is it still has to feel right. Remember I was saying about the Temu catalog. I'll tell a story that kind of describes it. When I started working on Cyberpunk 2077, I was in Poland, which in those days I was there about every 2 months. I was beginning to really like Polish food. And they...
What's not to like?
Yeah, it's great. Well, you're part Polish.
I'm very Polish.
Yeah, well...
Kovaleski.
That's true. That's definitely Polish. Any rate, enough on Polish foods. I'm getting hungry. One of the things I had happen was, I was wandering around CD Projekt, which is a big building with tons and tons of people. And one thing people do over there when I'm over is say, Mike, come here. I want to show you something. So I had a guy say, Mike, come over here. I want to show you the guns. And he showed me all the guns his team had been building, and I walked through that part of the development cycle area. And they were like shiny with fins. And I went, no. And he's like, no, you don't like it? And I said, no, you don't understand. Cyberpunk weapons are not only functional in terms of what they should do, i.e. if I shoot you with a blaster or I shoot you with a 9mm, you're equally dead in terms of the points. But if you see me pull out a little silver handgun, kind of like in, I'm trying to think of that.
Men in Black. Men in Black.
Men in Black, yeah. The noisy cricket, nobody believes the noisy cricket. I'm not going to have the other thing I need with that weapon, which is intimidation. And so I'm sitting here explaining to him, no, dude, they're not shiny, they're not pretty. They're, in pretty much large, black, complex-looking things that are metal. They have like a little eye, like LEDs scattered through them, so they look like they're looking at you. They're intimidation before you ever pulled the trigger.
So real quick, we're going to keep going for a little bit, but if people want to have any questions, if you want to start lining up at the mic here, we're going to take questions for the last like 15-ish minutes of this thing. But I have to go back to, so for me, my story on doing the homework. So in my days being a game designer, I've done everything from actually plant a garden of the flowers of the English countryside to drive a T-34. And I figured you'd appreciate this one because I don't know if I can talk about the game, but we were building this game and it didn't feel right. And I was working at a gigantic corporation, so I was like, well, get me a T-34 and I'll make it. And apparently that went through budget, and they did. And for those who don't know, T-34s are the Russian tanks that they basically won World War II with, right? And so,
are still trying to use over.
oh God, yes.
Yes, and they're blowing up in.
Well, you know what's really funny? What cracked me up, what I learned, and I could never have done this without the experience, is especially in the early days, you know, these are big things with big engines that just rumble. You can't hear each other in them. And in American tanks during World War II and British tanks, you always see them in those headphones. They've got these big, clunky early radio sets to talk to each other. But not Russia. They couldn't afford any of that stuff. That seems all extra. We're just pushing tanks. We're literally driving tanks out of the factory straight into a battle. And so I got in, and there's this old guy teaching us how to drive it, and they've got the rest of the crew there, and you've got the commander standing in the cupola, right? And there's the driver in front of you, and there's the gunner to the right and the left, and you're like, okay, this is great, but I can't hear. I'm shouting at this guy, and I can't hear me at all. And he's like, oh, no, this is Russian tank. You want the driver to turn right. The reason he's sitting in front of you is you kick him on the right shoulder, and you want him to turn left, you kick him on the left shoulder. This made the game. It was glorious. But do you have anything that you want to add to, like, how we develop from a concept to an actual thing that feels like how it's supposed to play?
For me, I kind of feel like we're arms dealers sometimes. because
Cyber arms dealers.
But you are, because you put together a game and you start play testing it, and every single decision that we do, I want it to feel good. And that's what I'm looking for. Does it feel good? If somebody has to make a decision, it's not that, oh, did you get kicked in the face and that's your fault. That still feels good. But I had to make a decision that I didn't want to make, and there was nothing good about it. It's just, I knew it wasn't going to work unless I made that decision. So every single decision you want to do, you want it to feel good when it happens. So if you have to make a rule that makes an exception to make something feel good, then you have a bad set of rules, and you have to go back and simplify it a little bit to get it. So no, I really try hard when we're doing our stuff to not say no.
Mm-hmm.
And
I want people to be able to say yes to everything, and if I make them say no to something, there's a real reason why you have to say no to it, because it's going to break something.
I sort of semi-agree with John on that, except that I will say no occasionally if I want people to have to work to pay a price. So that means, you know, you want the really big, cool thing, you are going to have to get it from somewhere, or it may not.
But you're not saying no, you're
But
making them pay up for it.
You're right, I'm not saying no exactly. I'm saying, if you want this for Christmas, you're gonna have to save up.
Yes.
So it looks like we might have some questions from the internet. All right.
My God.
Hit us, internet.
All right. This is from our Night Crew game server. V asks, what's your favorite and most hated cyberpunk trope?
Sorry, I missed the last word.
Yeah.
Trope?
So your most favorite and most hated cyberpunk trope. I kind of got mine, but we've started this way a lot.
Oh, I'm going to go
Yeah.
last. You guys go.
Mike, you got anything
You have no
yours?
tropes?
Not really.
Okay.
So my,
We'll work on that. Okay. For me, my hated one is the superheroic hero, you know, because that's not really cyberpunk. It's the guy that, you know, is Sylvester Stallone or whatever, who has the hardware and he just kind of blows through it. I hate that trope as it comes into cyberpunk, because then it's a different kind of adventure. It's an adventure that's about not, you know, how I work this out, but a power fantasy. not exciting. On the flip side, what I do love is adventures and elements that require knowledge and thinking, what am I going to do with this? You know, it's things that stop you and go, okay, I can do this amazing thing. How do I use it? Or, you know, they're trying to like murder my mother and they just blew up our car. You know, what things do I have access to? And the other major important trope that I love is that cyberpunks, I believe, should, if they're clever and smart and willing to go the distance, they should win. You know, I love William Gibson, but his heroes tend to die. And, you know, and they're not winners. They're, you know, they're putting up with it. And that was another thing that hardwired appeal to me in, is that Cowboy wins. He's got a goal. He's going to bring the orbitals down. This is how he's kind of planning to do it, you know. But he doesn't, for example, do it because he's a big, tall dude with huge guns and a tank. He figures how to manipulate the stock market to crash the orbital's finances. You know, and you looked at that and you went, okay, how did he do that? Well, they had to hack into systems, and they had to, you know, find this stuff, and they had to go kill one guy that they could get numbers off of, and so forth like that. It was not about, you know, his brawny thews. It was smart. And in the final analysis, in the cyberpunk world, your brains are the most important cyber piece you have.
I'll give mine real quick. My favorite cyberpunk trope is one that kind of goes underneath and often sort of obscured by everything else that's going on in cyberpunk. But like in cyberpunk, in almost every cyberpunk world, you might die tomorrow, but you are really alive today. Like in a way that we usually don't experience in our modern world. And I love that about cyberpunk. My least favorite trope, cyberpunk should be a sexy world. It should be about people who look cool and look good and know it. But I've seen a lot of cyberpunk stuff that veers off into the leering, and that's where not as good on that one. What are your thoughts?
I think the people playing it want to play those things, but the world is dark. You drive around in the city, you've got 90% of it seems like they're living in a ditch, and they can't afford it, and they're starving. And that's a whole nother thing. I almost feel like as a hero, you're trying not to become that.
Yeah, I would partially agree, but I have to admit, when I was working on CP originally in 2013, I had a mantra that was really big in, like, I guess my dad's generation. He was in Vietnam. And it was, you know, yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I fear no evil, because I am the meanest motherfucker in the valley.
Yep.
And the whole thing on Cyberpunk is, you know, you basically decide, yeah, this is a terrible, craptastic world, but I'm going to win it. You know, and I'm not naturally set up to win it, but I'm going to be the meanest, toughest mother with what I have. You know, and the other thing, trope I love in Cyberpunk is you do pick the people you care about.
Yes.
And you will go to the wall for them because you've made a decision on what is valuable.
You choose your family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I think we can do this, but let's rapid fire.
Right.
Hit us.
So, while writing adventures, I listen to a lot of music for inspiration. When you guys were writing your various games, what was that genre of music, or what was that song that really pulled some of your best ideas out?
So interestingly, a lot of Cyberpunk Legends was written to a Korean post-rock band called Jambani, which I love, which I don't know if anyone else would, but I think they're great. And then for me, you know, I grew up as a grunge kid, so like Soundgarden, those sort of things are the soundtrack for me.
For me, weirdly enough, Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run.
Ooh.
And the reason is that if you really look at the lyrics, it's about, you know, I'm in a craptastic situation, and, you know, you and I are going to get together and get out of here. And we haven't figured exactly how, but together we're going to do it. And I loved that. And when I was writing this thing, there was a moment where I was driving my ratty mid-1960s Sunbeam Alpine sports car, and I had that cranked up, as I'm roaring down the road, and I'm going, yeah, the whole idea of it is that I'm going to do this. I'm going to push the boundary. I'm going to go where I need to go. I'm going to win this. And so Born to Run was it for me.
I think it depends on the miniature I'm working on, because if I'm doing motorcycles, then I've got outside music going on. I had a lot of classic rock playing on in the background, but I'm also a country guy, so I listen to a lot of that. I don't know why I got a lot of country going on right now as I'm working on the Nomads.
Yeah,
That's playing
that's
on the
perfect.
background.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, it's working for me.
No, that makes total sense. I've wanted to do a Nomad campaign that's actually basically just Blood Meridians, so I get this.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I'm going to rapid fire us because
Yeah, keep
time.
going.
Hit
Next.
us.
Next.
So Cyberpunk now has so many media adaptions and things like that, and there's a form of consistency against some of the things adapted. So how do you go about making it your own while keeping that consistency in all these different platforms?
In terms of what you're going to make, or
Yeah,
the
like
product that you already have?
some of the stuff in the board game looks so like some of the stuff in the game, and looks like some of the stuff in the anime while still being unique.
You have to know what your world does. There's a reason why Night City looks like it walked out of my head. And that is that I knew what Night City was down to the bone and how it worked. I have maps that show where the sewers are, where the electrical systems are, whatever. But what I knew was how it felt. And I knew what place was going to be important. So when later on Trigger, for example, worked on Edge Runners, they could look at it and they could go, yeah, I've got the city. And, if Lucy's got this thing about space and going to the moon, where do I have to be to look at a rocket ship taking off for the moon? So you have to know the world. You have to be willing to write it down, and you can't make it so vague that people don't know where they're walking. That's one of the things. I love Star Wars for many things, but Star Wars is terrible at figuring out what its worlds really do. And that's why you're always on Tatooine, pretty much. I look at it, the first time I saw a world in Star Wars that looked like they really worked with it was second season Mandalorian, when they go to the orbital colony. And I'm going, yeah, now they thought how that worked.
For us, it was simply looking at pieces of Cyberpunk that had not been explored as much as some of the others, and things that I love, right? So I talked earlier about the vibrance and the life. We wanted to get a lot of that hope, even though you're in this terrible situation, like you're alive, and so there's possibility in tomorrow. And so we've got a lot of that in the art style and the colors and all that sort of thing. And then from the other side, to me, this corporate stuff, when you're down there, when you're a runner, a corporation is basically the same as a cosmic horror, right? And so we've got a lot of that feel that you would get in a cosmic horror experience, that mystery and undercurrent, what some strange terribleness is going on, but rather than have it be like Cthulhu or something like that, oh, that's how the corps operate in this world. And so just taking it and looking at it, what's your lens on it?
No, I'm good.
All right, and pass, I like it. This
Okay.
speeds us up, this is excellent. All right, but you're answering this one first.
Uh-oh.
So make it really difficult or really personal.
So I would say right away, even from reading the original 2013, I think more than anything else at the time especially, I think Night City has a certain personality that makes it as like its own character in the story. And I think reading it instantly, you're already under the assumption that Night City permeates everyone and permeates everything. And I was just wondering how you went about creating something so inhuman into something the most human, I think.
John, I think you're off the hook. I think
I'm
this
totally
one
off the hook. This is you.
Okay. Okay. One of the things I realized a while back was that Night City was a character. And indeed, when I am hanging out with the guys in CD Projekt, we have said that. Night City is the major character, and that is how it works. So that, for example, is why Edge Runners worked, because the city was the adversary. And, David was not going up against, a supervillain or whatever. He was going up against a system that just ground you into the dirt. His mother dies senselessly And, you know, if they had been robbing them, that would have made sense. No, she was in the middle when they shot everything up. Basically, what I think is that that kind of world, you have to have it, you know, consistently violence happens without a reason. You have to look at it as these are the ways you protect yourself. It's really tough to work that out because you're tempted to go totally nihilistic. But remember what I said about you need to have heroes. And you don't need superheroes, you need heroes, you know. And I get a lot of, you know, newspapers and, you know, magazines, stuff like that around the world. And I'm always struck by the stories about, you know, some guy out there who said, you know, everything in my neighborhood, you know, died in the landfill of all the corporate crap, and I'm going to go clean it up. And he goes in and takes him 5 years to clean it up, but other people look at what he's doing and they go, yeah, okay, he cleaned up, you know, half of that, I'll go help him. That's a very cyberpunk kind of thing, because you're making change. It may not be super fast, and in a super cyberpunk universe, you're expecting the corporation to go, you're not messing along with our landfill full of, you know, toxic waste, because you'll expose what we left here. So then you have to figure out how to deal with it. And you're still fighting the fight. You just have to pick new tools.
So who's the data center hero? They're building these data centers. People are getting sick. Everything's.
But they're turning them back. I just read like 4 or 5 articles that listed all the data centers that aren't working.
Reverting.
Yeah, that are reverting, because one of the things we're going to find is, you know, if your problem is a data center, you know, why am I taking it off the major grid? I should be going out and getting dead batteries, you know, from automobiles and building my own power setups where I am not having to take it off the grid, you know. And if I design the grid so if you draw a certain amount, it doesn't work anymore, you know, just like, well, I have a 9-volt battery, but I need 250,000, you know, volts to get it to work. I'm going to find another way.
Yep.
All right, we got time for probably the last 2 questions, so.
So you've talked a lot about how a lot of the core of Cyberpunk is that power fantasy, being able to make yourself what you want to be, and bust into the bar with the big spiky gun. But at the heart of it, a lot of the root of the setting also seems to be the inherent futility in what you're doing. Like, you can make local changes, you can change people's hearts, but the systems arrayed against you are so large and so entrenched that nothing you can do is going to change that. You see that in, like, Johnny Silverhand and everything he did and what it didn't matter in the end, right? But how do you reconcile that inherent futility of what people try to do with that inherent power fantasy that you're talking about?
So, to me, do you want to answer that one? Or?
No, go ahead, and I'll step in.
Because this one is really fascinating to me, because it's the effort alone that matters, and what you're holding out is, yes, I may fail, you may fail, we may do this, but if we all keep trying at it, at someday, this will change, right? And so you have to express that, because there's a tragedy, but a noble tragedy in this, oh yeah, I blew up Arasaka, and they came back, right? I sacrificed everything to try and make a change, and I couldn't. But now some other people are, right? And sooner or later, that weight, that idea that if we all give this up, each of us may be doing something futile individually, but as a group over time, maybe there's a possibility we get there. And I think that's what you have to hold out.
Another thing is that you may not win on the values that you thought you were going to win. Let's look at the Arasaka situation. You know, in the end, a pocket nuke that probably about a third of the people in this room can figure out how to do blew up the core base of Arasaka. And it reset and became a, what's the term I want for disruptive influence? And for, 10, 15 years, although it was a mess, those corporations did not have free hand to do what they wanted to do. And that's important, but it's not the victory of, we got rid of Arasaka and everything's wonderful. It became, okay, I can't win all of it, but I can win a certain amount of it, and I can be enough of a disruptor to set things up to win again. You know, and the more, well, it's like looking at the Ukrainian-Russian war and going, yeah, right now I can't tackle all this stuff, but I can put in a damn good fight that buys me time. And I will probably win.
Yeah, you change the rules.
Yeah, you change the disruptor.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to be a disruptor, it's a cyberpunk.
All right, from the internet, I'm really torn because I don't think we have enough time for this question. So I'm going to do the short question, which is, what kind of tanks has Mike driven?
Say that again.
What have you driven, Mike?
What have
What
I
kind of
driven?
tanks have you driven, Mike?
Oh, geez. I've driven 3 or 4 different Sunbeam Alpine sports cars, a battered MG midget that I rebuilt from the ground up, an old Volkswagen, a Trans Am, an ancient Barracuda that was just great because it looked like hell. We used to call it the Millennium Falcon. It looked like hell. It could outrun everything in a police state, the police department of Davis, California. And my wife would steal it and do just that, which sort of tells me something. You know, right now, oddly enough, my fastest car is a Tesla, and I mainly, when we got it, discovered it could like stomp every single Porsche in our area.
Ships? Any boats?
Sailboats.
Sailboats? Cool.
Yeah, power boats don't interest me all that much.
Okay.
Motorcycles, mix, you know. Basically, what I've looked at is fast cars.
Okay, nice.
You said there was one other that was a little bit longer. You can throw it at us. I think we have time to do just that since we
All
started.
right, let's do it. What is the most cyberpunk, non-cyberpunk story for these guys? Movie, comics, etc.
So I couldn't hear the end of it.
Sure. What is the most non-cyberpunk story for these guys? It could be movies, it could be comics, etc.
Cyberpunk story?
That, I'm reading it
Oh.
directly from the internet.
Interesting.
Streets of Fire. Streets of Fire has all the elements and no cyberware, no really super cool weapons. It's basically a guy who comes home from the army and his girlfriend has been kidnapped by a bunch of guys who could be any number of thugs. And what are his weapons? He's got a shotgun and a handgun. But he has determined how he wants to do it to get her back. And it also has great, you know, rock and roll score. But that's mine.
I'm going to go with The Invisibles.
Yeah, that's
Invisibles is a good one.
yeah.
That's why I had to jump in, so that way you couldn't steal it from me.
Now I'm gonna go with the Invisibles.
All right, yes, sir.
Lost.
All right, and with that, we're done. If you want to try Cyberpunk Legends, you can find us over at booth 2200.
If you want to check out the new Cyberpunk product, Night City, it's been upgraded to 2045. The project is amazing. I worked on the first one and designed it, but this thing just leaves it in the dirt. And what's important is it shows how a city works at the person level.
And if you want to see how crazy some miniature tables could be in the cyberpunk universe, harbors and giant buildings and everything else, come by C160.
Yeah, you know, every time I go by John's stuff, I just kind of go, okay, can I move into your house now? You all the toys.
It is very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for listening to us ramble for an hour. I hope the rest of your con's great.